big woodsman Paul Bunyan?
I'm going to say yes.
I would actually go and say that like Paul Bunyan would fall more into the kaijin category than the kaiju category. And that's just because it's very, very large human man, but again, not necessarily like wasn't magical. He's just a man who got really big, and then it's like, well, I'm gonna go and deforest an entire place in a single swing.
Still deforest the whole place, so yeah.
I mean, if you want to get technical, his ox blue would be more kaiju than like him.
Just a reminder, this is a spoiler-heavy podcast. Different series that require a spoiler warning will be in the description. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Gaming Theater Podcast. Today's episode is going to be something interestingly different for a new section of Gaming Theater Podcasts that we plan on doing. And so these are our classic monster reviews. A classic monster review is essentially where we take one monster that has shown up in multiple forms of different media, be it video games, books, comics, movies, anime, whatever other cases that may be, and that they just keep reoccurring themselves over and over again. Similar to like some of the other things that we've talked about. So in today's episode, we're going to go with Kaiju, the giant monsters of the film world. Now, to help me out with this episode of this podcast, we've got a couple of guests that are with us today. I am your host. My name is Leo. I'm the Geek Scorpio.
So this is Steven. I am Nibelsnarf. You'll find me constantly hanging around bugging Geek Scorpio, Leo, because that's what I like to do.
I'm Kyle, also known as K-Bye.
I'm the Broasaurus, or just Bro for short. You'll pretty much find me like anywhere and everywhere.
All right, great. So with that, before we get started, as always, let's take a quick stop in the magical merch booth.
Hi everyone, this is Dean Dane and Zombie Hand for Gaming Theater Podcast.
For the month of November, we have decided to team up with a great charity called Extra Life.
Extra Life is a fundraising program of Children's Miracle Network hospitals. The Extra Life community fundraises year-round to change kids' health to change the future.
Donations go to children's hospitals to fund critical life-saving treatments and healthcare services, along with innovative research, vital pediatric medical equipment, and child life services.
Each year, both of us have been doing a live stream event to help raise funds for Extra Life. For the month of November, Gaming Theater will donate $5 for each of our Patreon members.
There will also be links in the description for each member of Gaming Theater Presents who's doing a live stream for Extra Life. Dates and times of when these streams will go live will be listed on Gaming Theater Presents Twitter and Facebook feed.
Gaming Theater loves video games, and playing them to help a cause is something that we can all get behind. If you also want to help, you can join us on Twitch, help spread the word about Extra Life, or donate to our Extra Life campaigns.
Thank you for listening to this little part about Extra Life, and now back to the show.
All right, so now that we've gone through this, let me kind of explain the origins to this. So what we know of is kaijus. They've been kind of more and more popular, but they've never really died down in popularity since they started appearing in the films since the 50s. The origin and the name for kaiju is a Japanese term, which is for a type of a strange beast, is what it sort of roughly relates to. But in general, kaijus are usually gigantic monsters. And I think it's one of the few things that they called like dinosaurs when they first found bones of dinosaurs being in different areas. I might be wrong about that one, though.
I wouldn't rule it outside the realm of possibility, though. I mean, if you think about it, you find this giant bone head of what would appear to be a reptilian monster. Yeah, I mean, I'm like, especially back then when like technology wasn't nearly as advanced as it was, I'm sure they've unearthed things way back in the day as well, before technology got to a point where we could better identify. And I would say that that's pretty accurate. Probably still qualified as a kaiju.
Mm-hmm. Now, if we're starting at the beginning of kaijus, we're going to have to start with where the name kind of starts appearing into our normal vernacular, which is about 1954. That's when the first movie, Godzilla, which is officially considered the first kaiju film to actually come about. One thing that's kind of to note, it's not even the first giant monster movie that came out. Before that, and which is arguably as popular, was King Kong. But there's no terminology for it. They just called it a giant monster. And before that, we still have tall tales like Paul Bunyan of a giant monster, and you also have other sort of things. Dragons in mythology come up. Krakens, by their definition, might are also giant monsters. So having a giant monster isn't outside of the norm in this case. But kaiju is where we get that, and it's because of this type of filming of these giant monsters, specifically from Japan.
Oh no, I was gonna say something that a lot of people don't actually know in terms of like Godzilla is that although he's like considered like the base mold for a lot of giant monster and kaiju films, there was a film prior to Godzilla, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, that is heavily attributed to the inspiration behind Godzilla.
Yeah, it's actually very true in that because the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, if I remember correctly, was in 1952. It came out 1 or 2 years before Godzilla did. That is 100% true. But yes, that is actually very accurate to what Bro is there saying. Is that Godzilla himself was modeled after the American film The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Well, not modeled, but well,
But like heavily inspired.
yeah, heavily inspired. Because if I remember correctly, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was a quadruped, where Godzilla was a biped.
Yes, because the creature itself, if I remember correctly as well, very dinosaur esque in terms of its design. Again, much like you were saying there, quadruped versus bipedal, and I believe it was also had a lot of it attributed to like atomic explosions and tests is why said creature rose up.
It's atomic bomb testing. Of course, like this was kind of the theme back in that day too. Is like, what are the outcomes of nuclear fallout? Essentially, what would radiation do to the monsters? Because if you also think about it too, it's like if anybody's ever seen that film, then I know Bro here has. At least he's got a good idea what's going on with it. The 1997 Godzilla is more closely resembled to what the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was, the American Godzilla, because that was based off of essentially mutated iguana. So I'm sure it wasn't an iguana. I'm trying to remember what the actual lizard was that they based it off of. But that's kind of the same thing. It shared a lot of similarities to the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Just again, biped instead of quadruped.
Yeah, so this sort of phrase will end up doubling up on each other. They between these films, especially in the early '50s, they kind of define what makes a kaiju film a kaiju monster. So the biggest ones that I found from my research is this, and they don't all, and this is one of those moments where your mileage may vary, because not every description of it sticks with this description, and it still can be defined as a kaiju film. So the first one is giant monster. It just has to be big. So if it's that's one of the biggest characteristics, pun intended, of a kaiju film is that the creature is massive. Mainly to describe that, this is a concept of something that you cannot stop instantaneously. It's just a giant beast. That's sort of the big defining trait that's just across the board. If it's not a giant monster, why you can't call it a kaiju. The second thing is that the kaiju will typically represent a massive concept that we're putting into the form of a monster, like an allegory or a type of physical, not an effigy, but like an allegory for it. For Godzilla, that was simple. It was atomic weapons. It was atomic warfare, atomic weapons, and it created this devastating monster that could not be stopped. Which kind of makes sense because the origins of Godzilla was from the director and the creator was originally from, I think, Hiroshima. Or was he
I'm
from
trying to remember
Hiroshima?
on that one. To be honest with you, I didn't really.
I know that's what his inspiration was. Is the atomic bombs dropping?
Yeah, it was 100% was the inspiration of that. So
that being said, but that's not always the case. There is other kaiju films where if you take Pacific Rim, for example, climate change was a big effect to it because the climate change effect, it was part of the plot of the movie. The climate was being changed so rapidly that it made it hospitable for these kaijus to even bother to do it to monsters to come in and attack and want to take over. because why bother taking over a planet that you can't actually survive on? Though, there's several movies out there that apparently that little tidbit doesn't stop them. I think Signs is the one I'm thinking of.
Some people just want to watch the world burn, bro.
I'm just saying.
Or rather, some monsters just want to watch the world burn.
Don't conquer a planet that's basically acidic to yourself. Don't attack a planet with the intention of conquering it if your weakness is water.
I mean, so sometimes you just want to wreck shit,
I guess.
We're looking at you, War of the Worlds. We're looking at you.
When the planet is coded in 71% of your weakness.
That sounds like a challenge.
Very true.
But there's other ones like that. Mechagodzilla was an effigy of technology that some people see that as because every time Mechagodzilla shows up, Mechagodzilla goes crazy.
Well, it depends on which iteration of Mechagodzilla we're talking about here. Because in reality, Mechagodzilla is only a machine at the end of the day until you get to the more recent version of Mechagodzilla, where you find out Mechagodzilla is being controlled by a spirit. And I'm not talking the most recent Legacy Godzilla movie, which, although that Mechagodzilla was dope, which was just Ghidorah, spoiler, controlling it at the end of the day. I'm talking about the most recent Japanese Mechagodzilla film that had come out, I think. Oh, shoot.
Because you're referring to Kiryu is the one.
Yes, Kiryu. Thank you.
Because that was actually built upon Godzilla's remains.
Correct.
Or the prior Godzilla, I should say.
Yep. And that Godzilla was the Kiryu Mechagodzilla was the one that went ballistic, but just sheer fact that it was Godzilla at the end of the day. It was just Godzilla doing what Godzilla does best. Shows up, wreck shit, leaves.
Yeah. And then King Kong films tend to have something about, I think the original was about colonialism.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. And so that's where they have. But essentially, they're a concept. And we put it into the form of a giant monster because that makes for a better film. Plus, it's fun to watch a monster fight. All right, so that's the sort of the second representation. The third one is conventional weaponry does not work. Guns, firearms, and missiles usually will not work for it against this monster. Or the amount of them is so much that it's ridiculous to even consider that as a viable option. Pacific Rim makes a good example of that. The first kaiju that shows up before they make the robots, which I can't remember the robot's name now, but before they make those robots to fight the kaiju, it took them 5 days of nonstop firing, a massive destruction before they finally brought one kaiju down.
Yeah, you're talking about the Jaegers is what you're talking about, by the way.
Jaegers, that's what they're called.
Oh, don't shoot them. You'll just make them angry.
Don't shoot them, make them angry. Yeah, no, I mean, if we're also going to say where conventional weapons can't kill them, or it takes a crap ton of conventional weapons to kill them. Hey, guess what? American 1997 Godzilla, you're out. You died. Missiles to your neck, bud. You're dead.
A lot of them.
That wasn't even that much. It was maybe 6. They just got him trapped up on the bridge and then hit him with 6 missiles in the neck and he went down.
Oh, that's true.
He was just fast. He was very quick. That's all it was.
Yeah. So that's one of the other things, which is why a lot of the solution is send another kaiju to fight them.
See all 50 plus Godzilla films that have another kaiju.
See, so that's actually something kind of funny about the whole lead a kaiju to destroy a kaiju concept. There is a Godzilla movie. To this day, I love it because of how ridiculous it is. It's Final War.
Yes.
Good one.
Yes, that's a great one.
Oh, I love that one, yes.
And Final Wars is a perfect example of it because, we fight Godzilla, we lose to Godzilla, we lure Godzilla to the Arctic, break the Arctic underneath Godzilla, freeze them in there, and then, sure enough, aliens are like, we want peace, we wish to coexist with you. As they're secretly, spoilers here, infiltrating the ranks of every single government in the world. And sure enough, it's like, well, your option for peace kind of sucked. So other alien takes out, first alien goes, cool, you're going to be our cattle now. And by the way, this is now a hostile takeover. Proceeds to release every single captured kaiju along the world. And we have to literally rely on our initial destructor to combat this. And the way we go about it, we break the ice, we let Godzilla out, and then we carrot and stick Godzilla to every major city with a kaiju to have Godzilla then face that kaiju as the aliens are going, this isn't right. We need this guy. We need this monster. It's like, we can't. We've tried capturing Godzilla and every attempt has failed. Why? It's Godzilla.
Yeah, it's. I mean, plot armor first off. Second off, Godzilla.
Right, exactly. and to this day, one of the main reasons why I love this movie so much is the sheer fact that, like, Toho, the creators of Godzilla, bought the rights to the American Godzilla from 1999, the Matthew
Yes.
Broderick film, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
And they get to Sydney, Australia, with the Sydney Opera House. The aliens are like, all right, send him in. And they just beam drop in the American Godzilla, rebranded as Zilla, Zilla.
Yeah.
And they have Zilla face Godzilla. The fight took all of 20 seconds, ending in, like, Zilla being smacked into the Sydney Opera House and then just beam deathed.
Yep.
And just the alien throwing a tantrum over that. It's like, I knew I shouldn't have gone and trusted that fish eater.
Yeah. Yeah, I laughed pretty hard at that.
It was such a good scene.
It was, because again, it's just one of those, like, just taking jabs at it. The Matthew Broderick Godzilla. Was it 1999? I guess it was 99.
That's 99. Yeah.
I was thinking 97. That's right, because then Godzilla 2000 came out to redeem the actual Godzilla franchise at that point.
Yes, the one Godzilla movie that I actually fell asleep during.
Right. But
it's never a good sign if you're falling asleep to a kaiju movie. All that destruction, man, I'm taking a nap.
In the theater.
Yeah, I don't blame you on that one. I remember seeing that in the theater too, kind of walking out at the end of it all, just feeling so much heavy disdain going, that's not my Godzilla.
98. It's 98 is when
okay,
that one came out.
Oh, is it 98?
It was in that ballpark. I was still in high school. Like, I was a sophomore in high school when it came out, so that would have been 98.
So with that, but yeah, Toho is the big. Toho makes other things than Godzilla, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but Toho's biggest franchise is, of course, Godzilla.
Yeah, because Toho creates.
Yeah, Toho also does animation, if I remember correctly, too.
They do.
They did Macross. Yeah, they did Macross. They did Go 13. So, oh yeah, I'm right now looking at it right now too. So they did Macross. My Neighbor Totoro. That's another one.
They did Macross. They did
Vampire Hunter D. That's another one. Yep.
It did Space Battleship Yamamoto.
And I believe they did the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1987 intro, and possibly the first 4 episodes.
Oh, they did Akira. That's what I was trying to think of.
Akira, that was the big one I was trying to remember. Yeah, Akira.
Yep. At that time it was Akira, and then of course Devil Hunter Yoko was another good one too. Even though it was a miniseries, I still recommend that. It's a fantastic one. But not to digress, not to get too far off track. Not to get too far off track.
Not to digress. This is about Toho.
I mean, yes, but no.
Well, I mean, it is about Toho and the fact that it's their baby that they have graced us with for the last 50 plus years. Which, at this time too, we should also go ahead and say that, hey, we're also on the 50th anniversary of when Godzilla versus Gigan came out, and they had just already released. And I'm going to go ahead and do a shameless plug here. They had just released the first Toho-backed mini project that was an animation of Godzilla versus Gigan Rex, which, for anybody who's watching this podcast, you go to YouTube, you can load it up. It's free. It's a 7-minute film. It's just Godzilla and Gigan, an army of Gigans fighting. And then by the end of it all, this new Gigan shows up called Gigan Rex. Heavily recommend it. Was awesome from the moment it started to the moment it ended. Strongly recommended. 7 minutes of your time, you won't feel like it was wasted, unless you hate watching big things beat the crap out of each other. At that point, I just question you. That's all it is.
Now, that being said, the last thing on that one and this is more of a pattern than anything else, and it's not a solid thing, is that they're usually not created by magic for one reason or another.
Correct.
Now, the main reason for that, it has to go with that first one that we said earlier, as Kaiju being an allegory. So, if they're made by magic, that's not an allegory for anything. That's a plot excuse to have a giant monster.
I mean,
Yep.
yeah.
Because a lot of the origins for a lot of the kaiju, there's the smog monster, which is from that Godzilla fight. I can't remember his name.
Hedorah.
Hedorah? Yeah.
It's Hedorah.
But it's made from pollution. There's aliens, which airdrop.
You're thinking Gigan, which is also a fusion of like technology. There's also King Ghidorah.
Yeah.
King Ghidorah.
Well, and Gigan's a fusion of alien technology, depending on which iteration it is, but Gigan is alien technology.
Robotics, cybernetics, and the most common one, radiation.
Yep.
Radiation is big for making things big, at least in the 50s. Later, once people learn more about radiation, they realize that's not going to work nearly as often as you think.
Which, if we're going to talk about how it can't be magic, well, I'm sorry, Power Rangers, but pretty much damn near every single one of your monsters got to go. Most of them only grew to the size of a kaiju because of Rita Repulsa's magic wand.
Or like, varying other like scientific experiments.
True.
Because like look at oh shoot, what was it? What am I thinking? Lightspeed Rescue.
Yeah, Lightspeed Rescue.
Yep.
Yep.
Science in that case.
Yeah, I was science in that one, yeah.
But not all of the Power Rangers fall under that category. Some of those monsters are kaijus.
Yeah, that's why I said most of them, not all.
Goldar technically isn't the kaiju. They strip him of his powers, which makes him smaller because he loses wings, right?
No, he keeps his wings, but
he starts out small. His wings are just always tucked in.
Yeah, they're always tucked in until he grows, then his wings go out.
The original Sentai that's based on is very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's not good to be a kid in that show.
No, it's not.
No,
it's a lot darker and a lot weirder.
Yeah,
no.
Yeah. OG Green Ranger dies in the original one, and then that's why the Red Ranger gets the Dragon Crest, which is why in the American audience it's like, yes, we've lost our Green Ranger. Pass your powers on to keep them a part of the grid, and it's just like, here you go, Red. Thanks.
Not to mention that the Rita Repulsa of the original Sentai, Bandora, serves the Great Satan.
That she does.
That's the thing. This is where your mileage may vary. In general, most of the more well-known kaijus fit under all of those categories, but not all of them. Godzilla is the creator and nails all the tropes for it. But we still think of things like Kamen Rider and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and such as a kaiju because it's related to the giant monsters. So this is where your mileage may vary on your debate on whether it is or is not a kaiju is dependent on how many of these things that they hit.
See, because I feel like in terms of Kamen Rider, more often than not, the enemies themselves aren't actually giant even to begin with. More often, they are fairly small, and they tend to remain that way.
I think Ultraman would be a better...
Ultraman would be a much better example of kaiju.
Way better example for kaijus, to be honest with you, because that's all a good chunk of what Ultraman really was just...
Giant monster versus alien pro wrestler.
Pretty much. I mean, but that's not wrong. That's exactly what Broasaurus just said.
It's funny because that's accurate. It's really accurate.
And that's one of the reasons why Ultraman has kind of like stood out over the centuries, is like, it's the test of time. It's just like, if you have a monster with giant claws that can shoot beams, how do you face that? Well, we have this giant man who's made out of some sort of energy source who grew from a smaller man in some cases. And he's just going to pile drive this monster, He's going to pull out a Kaniku Buster or just, like, cross-chop its chest or throw him into a mountain, and just, like, blast him with a beam from his elbow. And we love that.
It's legit. It's a legit strategy. It works.
Yeah.
I mean, if we didn't have that, though, too, then it's like for anybody in the professional wrestling world, though, too, would also not understand that Jushin Liger, one of the greatest wrestlers, as well as Tiger Mask too, was based off of Sentai style characters, Ultraman, and everything else. So I mean, kind of a little fun sprinkle into that one in there too. But that's a different podcast down the line where we'll talk about that because there's always going to be that.
I believe that there is a professional wrestler, which goes by the nickname Kaiju.
I wouldn't be surprised by that. Kaiju Big Battel. Yep.
That's the one.
Yeah, so Kaiju Big Battel is actually a wrestling franchise, not a wrestler.
Yes, it is.
And the way that they work is that they actually use, very kaiju-inspired costumes.
Yep.
and they do it in a wrestling mannerism. Like there's actually a dude who's called Dr. Cube.
Yes, I was just looking at that.
And just it's straight up a man like in a business suit or like a long sleeve shirt who wears a cardboard box and a face cutout.
They've got
and that is the wrestling gimmick there.
They've got a referee called "You Call That a Knife Dundee"? Come on.
Yep.
Please tell me they have small buildings for the ring.
No, sadly.
I believe for the most part it's standard wrestling rings, but they do actually have like models and the like that are in there. Because one of the wrestlers is a giant waffle.
French toast. Yep, his nickname is the Awful Waffle.
Yep. But yes, there are actual giant buildings in the ring which get, thrown around and used as weapons, and there are chairs still.
Kaiju Big Battel Phyto Fantasy was a video game released on PC and mobile platforms. Now I'm gonna have to go hunt this down.
Funny enough, actually, I want to say it's in my Steam wish list to go and actually use for a future stream.
Let me see here. I'm gonna see if it's actually on Steam. If it is, I'm gonna be purchasing that. Anyways, getting back on track. That's amazing.
It is, and I actually do have it.
Is it Colossal Kaiju Combat? Is that what it is, or?
No, it's actually called Kaiju Big Battel Phyto Fantasy.
There it is, yeah.
Now, as certain things go, with kaijus, they also have their own subcategory for kaiju films. If you're wondering why we're talking about mostly films, because that's where the kaiju title remains, but other things are basically kaiju for itself. Godzilla is canon in the Marvel Universe somewhere. I always found that hilarious.
I can actually go on about this one here, because in the Marvel Universe, there is Godzilla. And yes, he is an actual kaiju. The thing I find funny about that version, and just in terms of Godzilla in general, is there is never a straight standard size. There is a man, and he becomes a very, very heavily inspired Godzilla monster, if you will. His name, and I love this, is the American Kaiju. And depending on the depiction, he's either got like the American flag like painted on his head or like down the front of the body, and just constantly shouts USA.
Just won't stop.
Oh my gosh.
And the reason as to how he got these powers is it was a project by guess who? America, to create a new super soldier. So they use Doc Ock's lizard formula, Pym particles, and
Oh, not Doc Ock.
Hank Pym.
Hank Pym particles, and if it's you're talking about the lizard, right?
Dr.
Correct.
Connors.
Yes.
Dr. Connors.
Dr. Connors lizard formula, Hank Pym's Pym particles, as well as the super soldier serum, and then of course gamma enhancements. Why not?
Why not?
And so the result of it is a giant, massive, very heavily inspired Godzilla monster by the name of American Kaiju that shouts USA.
I'm actually looking at this Godzilla too, and I actually there's a lot of things about this I didn't know, because I actually forgot that there was a Godzilla Marvel. That's Earth 616 in terms of which multiverse it's a part of, but
616 is the main.
Yeah,
so
that's the main one. So
that's
legit.
Ours.
Yeah, that's legitimately
yeah.
ours. But it gets even more interesting though. Is as I'm reading this, this Godzilla, the Marvel Godzilla, follows the same rule as the Hulk. It's one of the only few monsters that actually has rage power, which obviously means the more angry it is, the stronger it gets. So yeah, that's actually kind of interesting. And it is considered one of the 3 strongest beings, entities on Earth. On Earth, mind you, not in the universe. So, but on Earth, it is considered one of the 3 strongest beings. Obviously, the Hulk being the strongest because it's the fucking Hulk.
It's kind of his gimmick.
It's a shtick.
There's a reason why he's got a form called World Breaker Hulk, where he just takes a step and the Earth underneath him shatters, straight up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
one thing that I find is actually very noteworthy about the American Kaiju, in terms of Marvel Comics, is that the actual human's name himself, like the guy's name before he becomes American Kaiju, is a pun of Godzilla. His name is Todd Ziller.
Oh God, that's great. That's amazing.
Sometimes I love comic book logic because if your name sounds like it's the start of a supervillain, you're kind of done.
Yeah, kind of.
You don't see a whole lot of Smith Johnsons running around, but turning into superheroes or supervillains. But a guy whose nickname is Icicle, whose last name is Freeze, its nickname is Icicle. Yeah, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
Hmm. Speaking of Marvel, in that case, there was this period where Marvel decided to have a series of comics that were Marvel, but designed. It was called Marvel manga. They were designed as with
Yes.
similar origins for manga. That's the origin for Hulk. Turns into a Godzilla.
I'm not surprised by that in the slightest bit, but it makes total sense because again, rage power. That's literally how it works. Is that Hulk gets angry, or Hulk, and as long as his Hulk is angry, Hulk has a very strong chance of not dying ever.
Oh yeah. I mean, they've shown Hulk surviving like the vacuum of space,
Yep.
the literal atomic bombs.
Yep.
Most recently, there's actually a run of comics which I highly recommend for the Hulk because it actually brings him back to his original theme of being more of a horror character than anything else. The Immortal Hulk.
Oh yeah, but yeah, if you were trying to say even Marvel doesn't have a kaiju, nay, Marvel has, with permission from Toho, the kaiju.
Yeah, and they have
Yeah.
with the permission of Toho, and it's kind of interesting too because we talk about that as well because it's like kind of dipping back to Toho, and their integration with a lot of things. If it weren't for Toho, though, we wouldn't have nearly. I mean, we would still have it, but we wouldn't have nearly as many like excellent kaiju monsters that we can look at too. Because we also have others that we can spring from too. That's not just Godzilla. You also have the giant kaiju turtle known as Gamera.
Mm-hmm. Rodan, the giant pterodactyl.
Yep, Rodan,
King Caesar.
Yep, King Caesar, which was that was always an interesting one. King Caesar to me.
Was King Caesar the giant crab?
No,
you're thinking of Ebera.
Yeah, that was Ebera.
Oh, that's Ebera.
King Caesar was the bipedal dog like monster. I can't remember what he actually was, but
I want to say he was based more upon like the Japanese lions.
Yes, he was. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yes,
which weirdly enough, I mean, I'm gonna bash on King Caesar a little bit, like if only because I feel a little bit bad. King Caesar kind of reminds me of like a very strange shaved poodle, but technically based upon
based on a Shisa.
Shisa, yes.
Yeah. It's like a weird cross between like a lion and a dog.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what a Shisa is. So yes, you're absolutely right. Kyle's 100% right on that. So, and then of course you also have like a couple others too. Like you have Ebera, the giant crab. And then the one that was actually, if anybody had recently watched Godzilla, the anime, 0 Point, then you also had the one based off the dinosaur, Anguirus.
Anguirus.
Yeah, Anguirus, thank you, which was based off an actual dinosaur of the Ankylosaurus. So it's just a giant mutated Ankylosaurus, or well, depending on which iteration again, like that one is actually more like Anguirus was actually just a dinosaur who just survived. And that's all it was. That's all Anguirus was, but they still classify him as a kaiju because again, he does have some characteristics to kaijus, whereas like he's able to turn into a giant rolling ball and just bounce around like a giant spike ball and just smash into things.
Yeah.
And then, like that's just like I said. So it's like when we stop to think about it though, it's like if it weren't for Toho being around then, and I mean Toho is the reason why we are where we have space dragons, aka King Ghidorah. We have Leviathans, which is actually just called the Dragon, which was another Godzilla monster. Or no, actually, I'm sorry, it was not a Godzilla monster. It was in the Godzilla verse, but it was its own show, kind of like Gamera. But it was actually just called Dragon. And it was like a 1984 film, if I remember correctly, but it was just a giant sea monster that Toho had created based off of Leviathan, essentially. So
yeah, and back to the point, like Toho and Godzilla are not the first sort of big origins of it. Like Leviathans are mentioned in the Old Testament.
Correct.
That's how old that is.
Yep.
So we've always had concepts of it and of things that this is giant, but having just this is a quick way to describe a giant monster as a kaiju, that that doesn't come up until about the 50s, and we don't even play with it a lot until about the 80s, 90s when
Actually, closer to 60s and 70s when because that's I'm trying to remember which era of Godzilla that was, where it was literally like every year I think had two Godzilla films. It was Godzilla versus something.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, because in terms
Yeah.
of like Godzilla verse films,
Mhm.
that was more towards I want to say the 60s actually,
Yes, I think you're right. I do think it was the 60s as well. And
because you would have Godzilla versus Megalon, Godzilla versus
yep.
Mothra versus Monster Zero, aka King Ghidorah, or Godzilla versus the Smog Monster.
Yeah, which would make sense cinematically because the 50s to the 60s was sort of the rise of the monster movie.
And I mean that's also where that's also too in that era as well as where we also got the legendary Godzilla versus King Kong.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So it was in that same era. I think that was actually one of the first ones to kick the whole thing off too, was Godzilla versus King Kong, and then they just kind of went from there where Godzilla started fighting all these other monsters because before then it was just Godzilla, and then Godzilla raids again.
It's not the first of those, but it is. It was the most. It was an early one,
It is an early.
and the thing is that
Yeah, it was a very early one.
that helped it get to the masses for it because
Yeah.
and they sort of took the times from like the 30s and 40s when you would have X meaning Monster Y or Frankenstein versus Dracula, and a bunch of other ones that are like that. So,
Yep.
but this is the one that you have King Kong, which at this point would have been controlled by RKO. And King Kong cinematically is one of the most famous films out there because it was the first big film with special effects.
Yep. That is true.
Well, and on top of it, when you think about King Kong is technically America's giant monster, or kaiju, if you will. And the reason is, and actually, this is something I found out that's very interesting, because this is going to be very heavily spoiler filling, for like a 60s movie. But the reason as to why King Kong beats Godzilla, although Godzilla is stronger, more powerful, and has a wider variety of attacks, the reason why King Kong wins in the original film is because Toho wanted to appeal to American audiences.
Yep. That is very true. There, and because this also sparked the argument too. It was like, no, that's not true. That's like because there was a myth about there being a dual ending where, in the Japanese version of it all, Toho has Godzilla beat King Kong, and then
It's not a myth; they've made that, but the canon has it as King Kong wins against Godzilla.
yeah, I mean, yeah. Still, point being though, but it's Godzilla. Godzilla is the one that comes out, or not Godzilla. King Kong's the one that comes out. It's exactly because of what Bro said there. It's exactly because they wanted to appeal to the American audience, and they also wanted to get Godzilla back up and running again. Because after Godzilla Raids Again, which was the first also introduction of Anguirus, so it's another reason why I'm a big fan of Anguirus, because our boy, the Ankylosaurus, shows up in that film, the second movie of Godzilla, and has been around ever since then. They wanted to get this going because they already plan on having Godzilla wrestling matches every 2 years, essentially, and that's what they were going for.
My favorite thing is after this, like the United States' film companies don't make very many kaiju-based films, but what they do make is a large series of monkey and ape-based movies, like Planet of the Apes, King Kong Jr. I think is one of them.
Yeah,
I think there's I think it's called Big George. I want to say there's one with a giant ape, but he's not as big.
not as big.
That well, of course that'll come up later in the 80s. Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about Rampage.
Yeah, Rampage. Yeah,
Rampage is the game, and of course, we've got a giant gorilla, a giant lizard, and a giant wolf.
depending on which version of Rampage, I don't know if I would call the most recent with Dwayne the Rock Johnson a kaiju film, because while they were big and they were genetically mutated this way, they weren't really kaiju size.
They were more giant monsters, if anything.
Yeah, because like kaiju size, like when you think kaiju, you got to also keep in mind like we're talking like these things are as big as a practical building, not like a quarter the size of your average 10-story building. So, I mean,
Well, even then, still, most monsters do range in size. Typically, you can see them being like half a skyscraper in height. Like by all intents and purposes, they don't start out as kaiju, but they do grow to kaiju
yeah,
size.
it's true. And I think that, well, actually, now that I'm thinking about that too, I think the gator technically classifies as a kaiju because he was pretty freaking big, like bigger than George and the wolf. I do remember that.
Yeah.
So if we get down to it, that would make sense. Like, the gator would classify as a kaiju, but the other two would not. They would just be big monsters.
I mean, they're giant monsters. Like, I'm not gonna go be the one facing down George and Lizzie and Ralph and just thinking to myself, you know what? Now's a good time to figure out the dichotomy of this.
Just pause mid fight, just like, do you classify as a giant?
Well, and then we have to. Well, and then we also have to ask that question though too. It's like, if we go based off the '80s arcade game that had been released, are they technically kaiju's in that too? Because at the end of it all, when they get defeated, they transform back into a small human being.
Yes, they are, and here's why. Their ability to turn from small to big is not what determines a kaiju. However, each one of them has a plot related to pollution on how they get and radiation on how they transform.
Oh, that's right. You're right. I forgot about the radiation.
Yep, because at the end of it, it is science that has fucked things up and caused them to be those giants.
God damn it, science!
And plus, Rampage is really fun for just destroying a building or two.
I will always remember the night that we were over at your house, Leo, and Kyle and I we were all playing I think it was the GameCube Rampage. Yeah, it was the GameCube Rampage. And like, I think it's like 1 a.m. in the morning, and we're like on stage 100. And at that point, I'm tapping out because I'm just like holding my controller and falling asleep, and my character's just drifting to the left, walking to the left towards the wall. And Kyle looking over was like, we should probably call it Steve's asleep.
Oh, no, we finished that game.
That's
Didn't.
right, we did.
We finished that game.
That's right, we did, because we were like, we got to be close to the end. So I was like, I needed like 5 minutes to like stand up, stretch, walk around.
You took shifts in sleeping mode while the other one
Yeah.
covers them.
Oh yeah,
it is
and
a long game.
And then we said never again. We will never do that again. I don't think I've touched a Rampage game since then because of how much I just don't want to deal with that again.
Those games are super long. Even the one in the arcade has something like 50 plus stages on it.
And then I swore off ever actually, playing all the way through that game again. It's fun to pick up.
I mean, hear me out. Be a great Extra Life game.
Yeah,
it really would, actually.
It would be.
Just go down, bullet.
That's not a bad idea. Maybe we'll plan it for next year because I do have Rampage.
Rampage.
And I also have the ability to connect the GameCube to a HDMI output, so an Elgato device, so we could stream it if we wanted to do that. If we wanted to put ourselves through that hell.
How about Robot Alchemic Drive?
Oh, yes. That's a kaiju.
It is fun for what it is. It was hard for me to play it, but K-Mike could totally do it because he had more patience than I did.
Such awful voice acting.
And then we also have the other PlayStation 2 classic that is a kaiju, War of the Monsters.
So good. That's a hard game.
With this sort of brings up to my point of that there's weird subcategories for it, depending on which you have. Now, they mostly have different terminology for it. The first one is what's called Kaiju Iga, if I'm saying this right, which is essentially a large brawl of kaiju. This is your kaiju free-for-all. This is where we just want to see 16 monsters take each other on at the same time. Final Wars probably would be one of those ones.
Destroy all monsters.
Destroy all monsters. If you told me Destroy All Monsters had a plot, I wouldn't care. I know what I'm about. I know where I've in this movie for. I want to see a bunch of monsters fight each other.
It's like going to a Transformers film. I'm not there for the plot. I'm there to watch big robots beat the crap out of each other.
Wait,
exactly.
You're there for the plot? I was there for the Michael Bay, bass boom in my head.
There's also one a subgenre called Kaiju, which refers to the Great Kaiju, which is usually singular monsters that attack and everyone's fighting them. That's more of akin to the classic Godzilla movie or the original King Kong film or the remake to the King Kong film, remake to Godzilla.
Well, not just that, also the most recent anime, the most recent Godzilla Planet Godzilla anime that came out. That's a great one right there, actually, to Daikaiju, because that's the whole plot of that, is that basically Godzilla succeeded in getting rid of all the humans on the planet, and then they all left the planet, came back like 10,000 years later, and Godzilla has grown to an astronomical size, and they have to fight him to try to get their planet back.
Yep.
There's also Kaijin, which is an interesting one. A Kaijin is a kaiju-sized monster, but it's a humanoid kaiju-sized monster, like Ultraman.
Kamen Rider.
So you actually might find this kind of funny. In terms of kaijin, something that people actually don't realize, and it won't make sense when I first say this, but Frankenstein's monster is actually a kaijin, not the Americanized version or English one, but in the Japanese movies there are two massive Frankensteins. Those would be perfect examples of kaijin.
Really? Oh yes. There's a kaiju called Frankenstein, isn't it?
Yep. Literally, it's an ancient giant human.
Yep.
Neanderthal in appearance, looks like a caveman, but is called Frankenstein.
Right, I remember that. It looks super weird.
Just picture Frankenstein, but unga bunga.
Like some cross between the Neanderthal,
I love it.
but like big, and still has apparently a loincloth from a bunch of other monsters that are basically.
Listen, it's fashion. Can you really go and like critique it?
Hey, we don't judge, man. We don't judge.
But like, said Frankenstein has gone against other monsters, including like Baragon, Godzilla, even what was it called? I can't remember what it was. There was another one that like that Frankenstein fought, but I can't remember what the other giant monster was.
Unfortunately, I don't have much knowledge on that one because I don't think I've ever actually seen.
That's fair.
I knew they existed, but I've never watched them. Just most
Oh,
I haven't
absolutely.
got time to do so.
There's a lot of kaiju movies. What is it? Toho alone has 32 movies. That is just Godzilla.
And they got a new one coming out, baby. They're adding to it, and I'm loving it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited.
Another Godzilla versus Gigan. Bring it on. I'm on for this.
I mean, if it's anything like the recent like short cinematic that we got there, I am all about it.
Yeah, give me that Gigan Rex. Like, I want to see that in an actual film.
Right?
The last kind of subgenre that they have is called the Seijin.
Seijin.
Seijin, Seijin. Seijin, yeah. So it is essentially when you have a kaiju film, but it's specifically against an extraterrestrial.
So Ghidorah.
So Ghidorah is the big one.
Ghidorah is the big one there. Monster Zero. A lot of Ultraman monsters would fall under that category.
Technically, anything from Pacific Rim.
Almost all of Ultraman monsters fall under that category, actually, now that I think about it. I don't think a single Ultraman monster was not a space monster.
Like, there's like very few and far ones that are like, from Earth, but for the most part,
yeah, like
they come from, what was it, like Planet X or something?
It's always Planet X. It's always Planet X. Like, come on, Planet X is the bane of our bane of our happiness. They are the source of our misery when it comes to that.
Planet X just drops kaijus like it's nobody's business.
It's like, where are we gonna drop these things? Drop it on Earth.
Yeah, like this giant blue marble in the sky that's got some giant lizard walking around like an asshole smacking things with its tail. Yeah, just drop it there. It'll be fine.
I don't think they have a game plan for if they ever win. They're like, this guy stops Godzilla, that we now have a monster that stopped Godzilla. I hope it doesn't turn on us or anything like that.
Well, it's like when you get down to the two, it's like the way they go about how, like, it's how they always have this never-ending amount of monsters they just drop on us. Like, at that point, doesn't that just make them kind of like they're just throwing out their trash and we're kind of the dumpster for it?
Technically, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of what they're doing.
For like all intents and purposes,
Ultraman and Godzilla.
Technically speaking.
Yeah, Ultraman and Godzilla are the incinerators. That's all they are. They're just the incinerators.
Planet X has a real kaiju problem, but they finally figured out a way around it by dumping their kaiju problem on Earth.
Yeah.
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 Well, I mean, if you think about it, it's like dropping a monster onto a hospital planet or like a place that, isn't your own makes perfect sense in the sheer fact of, one, it is entertainment for us to watch. Doesn't matter if, it wins or not, it entertains us. And two, if it does win through whatever miraculous reason, we now have a more knowledgeable threat that we can deal with.
Yep.
versus the unknown.
Man, one day humans will get the technology to move Godzilla out into the universe, and then we'll see who's talking.
No, it won't happen, man. Like, do you not remember Space Godzilla? They tried.
So that's the thing about Space Godzilla, though. Space Godzilla, and this is actually something that always makes me laugh. Super Godzilla in Japan. Literally, I kid you not, is because of the result of like Godzilla cells flying into a white hole and then like just gaining sentience and then coming back to Earth.
Yep.
Like a weird like astro like homing beacon, so to speak. So like Space Godzilla is a Godzilla, much like Biolante would be. Technically speaking, Destroya can sort of kind of fall in that like realm, as well as like Orga.
Well, kind of. Destroyer is an interesting one because Destroyer actually was a trilobite that was evolved from the oxygen destroyer that was made to destroy the original Godzilla.
Right. But Destroya then goes on to try to absorb Godzilla's cells. And that's kind of like where,
yeah.
Destroya then evolves more and more.
More and more every time, yeah. Because every time Destroya came in contact with Godzilla, Destroya started evolving its form. So that's very true, yes.
That's kind of where I'm like sort of kind of with Destroya is that.
Yeah, but Destroya is still one of the coolest monsters.
They sort of fall into it, but not really. It's an odd one. Like Orga would be like another example of like monsters to fall in that kind of category.
Orga, that was the smog monster, wasn't it?
No, that was Hedorah. Orga was a monster created from Godzilla cells.
Oh, you're right. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. Because essentially it was an alien monster that absorbed Godzilla's cells, collected it, transformed into probably a monster that should work out both its arms. Because, like, the hand game is strong, but, like...
Yeah, but its arm game was, like...
It's got a terrible hunch, and then it has, like, a cannon that's built into its shoulder that it would fire from.
But it would classify still as a Saijin, though, because that is an alien Godzilla. Because that's exactly what it was. And I had to remember which one Orga was. That was the one from Godzilla 2000.
Yeah.
So,
Millennium, I think is what they called it, right?
Yeah, Godzilla 2000 Millennium, and then I think he came back later and fight all month like Godzilla. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, tell me about it.
There's so many Godzilla films. The one we were heavily praising earlier. It's
Final Wars?
Yeah, it's Final Wars because Orga does come back in that one.
Yeah.
Yep. So, had to think for a second there.
Yeah. Orga, funny enough, is also a hidden character in Destroy All Monsters, the game.
Yes, it is. It's also in Save the Earth and Unleashed, if I remember correctly, too.
I think.
So with that, that's sort of a general take on how kaijus work out. Now, before we end this podcast, I do want to go over a quick game with you guys called "Is It a Kaiju?" Based upon all the stuff that you guys know, which of these that you would qualify are kaijus or not? Most of the Mighty Morphin Power Ranger enemies, we've already talked about them. Not a kaiju.
For the most part. There are some.
For the most part.
Until about halfway through the episode.
I mean, yeah.
Okay, so next one I want to go through. Smog. Lord of the Rings. Is it a kaiju?
Smog.
The dragon?
The giant dragon. Is it a kaiju?
No.
I would say
no. That's a kami. That's more of a kami.
I mean, Smog itself, I wouldn't say falls in a kaiju category just because it's just a dragon, you know?
Yeah.
Not so much anything that's been like altered to it to create Smog into this large scale, almost like force of nature.
It was just born. Yeah. It was just born this way and just grew. It's more of a kami.
It's just a dragon. Nothing fancy. All right. Paul Bunyan. Big woodsman Paul Bunyan.
I'm going to say yes.
I would actually go and say that like Paul Bunyan would fall more into the kaijin category than the kaiju category. And that's just because it's very, very large human man, but again, not necessarily like wasn't magical. He's just a man who got really big, and then it's like, well, I'm gonna go and deforest an entire place in a single swing.
Still deforest the whole place, so yeah.
I mean, if you want to get technical, his ox blue would be more kaiju than like him.
Yeah, I was gonna say the ox. I was trying to think of the name of the ox. Yes, ox. The ox would definitely be a kaiju. Would be a kaiju, but Paul Bunyan himself, I think, is
The Kaijin.
yeah, kaiju.
Then Paul Bunyan is a mech.
Paul Bunyan's what protects us from the world from giant blue
Not wrong.
ox.
Can we get
Not
like a Paul Bunyan versus King Kong fight?
That's too much flannel for that kind of fight.
No, I
Yeah,
mean
we
it'd be
can't have
perfect
that.
though. Look, Paul Bunyan's got a beard. King Kong is covered in fur. Paul Bunyan has an axe. King Kong has an axe.
Yeah, I get you. All right, what about them, the giant ants from the old 1950s movies, the first big monster movie, the giant ant?
Yes, I would classify them as a kaiju.
Because they're definitely kaiju size compared to an ant,
Yeah,
and they're still really big.
they are irradiated ants that are massive in size.
No, I'm gonna say they're radiated, so they 100% qualify.
All
for
I can
it.
say to that is EDF.
EDF,
EDF.
EDF.
Oh, we are the valiant infantry.
I liked the 4.1 song better.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
That's what I keep hearing.
The 4.1 just had a better jingle to it.
Speaking of EDF, the giant spiders in the EDF,
Ugh.
100% kaiju.
100% kaiju, 100% kaiju.
100% kaiju.
Yeah, they count.
They're 100% kaiju.
Okay, how about the Stay Puft Marshmallow?
That's a good one.
Oh,
Mm.
I mean, technically speaking, like, in for all intents and purposes, technically Stay Puft would count as a kaiju, but I would want to lean Stay Puft more closely to like a kaijin, just because it's a humanoid appearance versus a like monstrous appearance.
Well, but if you think about it though, Stay Puft Marshmallow Man was created from a wish.
And a concept of, because you get to pick your champion, and that's the one that Ray picks.
Yeah, you get to choose the form of your destructor, and
Yeah.
of course, I chose something from like my childhood, just something so innocent and sweet that could never cause any but us. What did you do, Ray? I thought of Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
So I honestly say, even though it's made from spiritual energy, it counts. It's a kaiju.
It does.
It does. It does. Yeah. When you weigh the pros and cons of it, 100% does count as a kaiju.
Because you can only beat that thing by either A, stopping a god, or possibly hitting it with enough PK energy meter to just drop that sucker. And that mostly gets him to fall down.
Then I guess that brings up the second one, Statue of Liberty.
Yeah. I think the Statue of Liberty would be...
You know what?
Yeah.
I would actually go and like motion for the Statue of Liberty to be more of a mech than an actual kaiju.
I mean, they were writing inside the Statue of Liberty, so
And again, it is primarily metal, or was it copper, bronze? What was Statue of Liberty made out of technically?
Bronze.
Copper
Right,
bronze.
but it's
copper
bronze that is literally being animated to move.
And that's the thing though, because that's like say if you think about it too, it's like it requires the slime to basically get it going. That's almost on the levels of radiation.
And that's almost the same as as counting Mechagodzilla as a kaiju because of what it's built out of. So
And it kind of depends with Mechagodzilla,
Yeah.
because some forms sure more likely to be a kaiju than an actual mech, but other forms are just not. It's a mech.
it's a giant mech. So we're pro mech, still on the fence as far as kaiju.
I would say pro mech for sure. Kaiju with an asterisk.
Kaiju, but we'll put an asterisk on them. Okay.
We're gonna put an asterisk on that one. Kaiju, but with an asterisk, because it does require the ghost,
The ectoplasm.
basically
To
the ectoplasm to
Yeah,
get
the
to that
positively
point.
charged slime in order to go and
Yeah,
actually.
so that's
but
that's Kaiju
it's also
with
still
SR.
being piloted.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
the thing. It's being controlled the entire time.
That's
Hence
true.
why I would say mech.
Yeah, that's true. So that right there automatically, that drops it from the kaiju category. It requires a pilot.
in that case, the movie Monsters vs. Aliens. There's at least 2 giant creatures on them, but one of them is a person, and the other one is a giant bug that turns to a butterfly.
I would say kaiju and kaijin.
Yeah, I would classify that as kaijin.
Okay, how about this? Charles Barkley once fought Godzilla in a one-on-one basketball match.
Kaijin.
Like, still good.
Yep, it still classifies kaijin.
I still feel bad for Godzilla because just Godzilla got dunked in that comic.
He did.
He got dunked on. I'm sorry, but Godzilla's basketball game is not nearly as strong as Charles Barkley.
Listen, Godzilla's around to go and destroy cities, not ankles, okay?
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, Godzilla's got a massive tail. Just smacked Barkley across the city with that thing. He'll call it a day.
Like, basketball game? Barkley. One-on-one actual fight? Godzilla.
Godzilla, yeah.
Being attacked by a 1,000-foot tall Charles Barkley. Speaking of giants, the Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, that old classic movie from the 50s. Kaiju, right?
Kaiju.
Yeah, it's Kaiju. Because she gets that way thanks to science.
Sin from Final Fantasy X.
Kaiju.
The giant monster that's terrorizing the place.
Yeah, that's a Kaiju. Well, actually, no, because it's technically created by magic means.
Wait.
So
Sin?
Yeah, in Final Fantasy X, there's a giant creature called Sin that comes back and attacks, and they have to sacrifice a summoner to
quell it, essentially, to control it.
And major spoilers when it comes to Final Fantasy X, but it's what? How many years old now?
It's like a 20-year-old game, at least.
Yeah, at this point, if you haven't played it, that's not our problem.
I actually haven't.
Well, bro, it's not our problem.
So, I mean, yeah. Based off of everything I'm looking at here right now, I'm spoiled. I mean, for like all design purposes, like how it looks from what I can see movement wise, absolutely more kaiju than anything else.
Yeah, the summoner who gets sacrificed becomes... Okay, so...
But then when you look at its origin, though, it's technically not, though, because, again, it can't be magical. It can't be magical-based for it to classify as kaiju, and Sin is magic-based.
Not always. You can still have a magical-based kaiju, but they have to still fit in all the other categories.
Yeah, and like in this case here, I would say Sin by that logic then, although like kaiju in appearance due to size and everything would probably just fall under the whole like summoning practice and more than anything else.
Yeah. Well, and that's because that's what it is, because it's like what Kai said there, is that in order for Sin to be taken care of, you have to sacrifice a summoner for
You
it.
can't just beat it down and hope for the best.
Yeah, so basically, it definitely doesn't it looks like a kaiju, but it's not.
So more deity than actual kaiju.
Yeah, it like the Stay Puft Monster Real Man will go down if you hit it with enough energy, but you still need to have
enough energy.
You still need to have a proton pack to deal with it.
You need more than just a single proton pack. You need a lot of psychokinetic energy.
Well, you need a lot of nuclear power when you get down to it. Because if you think about it, that's what the proton packs are powered by, is just nuclear energy.
Yeah.
So that already shows that a nuclear bomb could get rid of the Stay Puft if it were dropped.
Okay.
So.
Speaking of nuclear, the behemoths from Fallout series, the giant super mutants.
Kaiju. I'd classify them as kaiju. They got
the behemoths from Fallout.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. In Fallout 3, and I think in Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and 76 has them now.
76 has them too.
I don't think I'd actually classify these as kaiju or kaijin even. They're just really big people.
Yeah, because the thing is that they are formed from radiation because they're all super mutants.
Which is why I would classify them, but yeah.
But they're more along the lines of like a Hulk.
That's true.
More than like an actual giant monster.
Every super mutant has the ability to become one of them if they gain enough irradiation and they become old enough, because those are like the oldest of the super mutants, if I remember right.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
But,
yes, you're absolutely right about that.
But yeah, I wouldn't classify these guys as like giant monsters or kaiju.
I mean, they're still big. Anything that's over 20 feet tall is still a big problem.
Right.
Anything that requires anything that could shrug off a fat boy and come at you still is a big problem. Let's be honest here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but for the most part, they're only in 3.
They're 4 as well.
I don't think there's any in New Vegas, though.
No, none in New Vegas. New Vegas doesn't have them. They're in 3, 4, and they're in 76 now.
Ah, okay. Deathwing from the World of Warcraft series.
Oh, Neltharion.
For Deathwing, I mean, I'd kind of put that under the whole like more of a dragon than an actual kaiju.
It's more of it's 100% a kami, because that one right there is definitely a dragon. Because when you get right down to it, like what his whole thing about is that the only reason why he gets to the size that he gets is magical corruption from an old god. But he was already kind of big to begin with, and he was still very much dragon in nature when he was created. He came from an egg. He was raised as a dragon. He just got corrupted by an old god's magic.
Okay. A really big dragon, but a really, really big one.
A very big dragon, 100%, causes a cataclysm.
You.
You don't cause a cataclysm and not. That's the part that gets me into the kaiju. Causes one cataclysm. The whole thing. All right. But yeah, I think that's about it. Those are my final thoughts on kaiju, really. If you can fit into at least 3 out of these 4 categories, then you can be a kaiju.
What about me? Am I a kaiju?
Only in spirit.
Only in spirit, my friend. Only in spirit.
In personality.
My main question is for each of you. Favorite Godzilla monster and why?
Ooh, yeah, let's end this with that. Favorite Godzilla monster and why? I am surprisingly a big fan of Mechagodzilla. I like the idea of a giant mecha that could be piloted, but I don't like the idea of mechas going rogue. That really means that I can't pilot that mecha at any point in time, or else it'll come back to bite me.
So you're not a fan of Kiryu Mechagodzilla. Got it.
Mm-hmm. But Mechagodzilla is one of my favorites.
I can see that. For me, Gigan. Like, obviously, I'm hyped about Gigan. It's just the fact that Gigan is just such a cool concept for a monster. It's a cyborg alien, essentially. And honestly, one of Godzilla's, next to King Ghidorah, one of Godzilla's biggest threats that he's ever come across. So
Gigan's a regular.
Oh yeah. Gigan always comes back.
Yep. I mean, Gigan's coming back again.
Yeah, right?
When will you learn, old man?
I like the young people.
How many times do I have to teach you this lesson?
That's it for me, though. I would say Gigan. What you got, bro? What's yours?
See, okay. Now, this is going to be tough for me. If we're going off of non-Godzilla, but Godzilla, Anguirus. I've always really loved the concept of, like, Anguirus' design. I love the spikes. I love how Anguirus moves.
Yep. I can agree with that.
But I'm a bit of a sucker, I'll admit it. Godzilla is my favorite. If I'm going into specific versions, one of my favorite Godzillas, actually, and this is what throws a lot of people off, aside from Millennium Godzilla, which was green, had the purple dorsal plates, one of my 2 favorite Godzillas is actually the 1978 Hanna-Barbera Godzilla.
No,
I love that.
I remember that for the Godzilla cartoon, right?
Yep, the Godzilla cartoon, which had one of the best intros ever.
Yes, it did.
And I love that, like, and this is the thing about it. That cartoon didn't use a single standard Godzilla monster. It was all unique, created monsters for the series because Hanna-Barbera could only get the rights to Godzilla, and even then, not quite on brand.
No. That's okay, though.
But that theme song, though, every single time I played,
I can see that. That was a pretty good one. I'd agree. All right, so I'm gonna put the question back on you there, Kai. What you got?
I was gonna say you all know me.
Oh, of course I do.
King Ghidorah all the way.
The Astro Monster.
Giant 3-headed space dragon that shoots lightning out of its mouth. I mean, it's not lightning per se, but it looks like lightning.
Good enough for me.
Looks like lightning. Acts like lightning.
Gravity beams.
Yeah, you went for the biggest and the baddest on that one.
Just likes flying over and causing random destruction. It was the coolest thing when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's officially called a Hydra.
I'd say it counts, yeah.
Technically, it has 3 heads. It has to have more than 2 heads to classify as a Hydra, and it can regrow its head. So yes, it does classify.
So yeah, that's a Hydra.
Yep, 100%.
Regeneration's the thing. Okay, so yeah, thanks for everybody who came to this podcast. If you have any discussion points or wanting to just sort of complain about this, you can add us on Twitter and on our Facebook feed. But for now, thanks you everybody for listening. This is Gaming Theater Podcast, yet another EXP boost. And that's logging out. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Toodle.
Take care.
Gaming Theater Podcast is hosted, created, produced, and edited by Leo Garcia, the Geek Scorpio. Our music is A Drinking Game. Stock media provided by Stormwave Audio /Pond5. Our cover art is by Adam Parker. You can find him at ParkerGFX on Twitter. If you want to send us some financial support to help with producing things for Gaming Theater, you can do so at patreon.com/gamingtheaterpresents. It helps us out. Want to send support that doesn't hit your wallet? Please leave a review with wherever you hear your podcasts and share our podcast with your friends. It really helps out. Thank you for listening.